Chapter scribe.
I actually started using the native methods. It seems to be working. It doesn't do OCR.
I can fumble through them.
A lot of them.
So I buy it.
It's almost entirely Russian.
So I've got that. Yes, I have all 5 decks. Probably not. Yes. You did. You're sitting in the wrong order.
Just stop.
This is just checking the floor mic. Paul, can you hear this?
Zero. All right. Okay, I think we're about ready.
Welcome to dispatch and the art area general meeting. If that's not your flight, please exit the aircraft now. Blue sheets are circulating. Please make sure you get your name on them. I just saw one go up close to the back. The other one, just wave it in the air. Thank you. We have our scribe and minute taker. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you, Barry and Krister. So I have those in the recording.
Please note, as Barry likes to say, note the note well. This establishes obligations around reporting intellectual property you may have regarding the material that will be discussed in this meeting, or you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used by the IETF, and you should consult with your IPR people before proceeding here. Mary, you want to do the deadlines? Usually call you that.
Yeah, okay, so these are our usual deadlines here. Oh, sorry. So what we've done, just to remind people what the official BOF deadline is, it used to be we tried to track that and have our stuff in before that, but they kept moving that up. So we're not quite aligned with that. So you have to think about if you might want an official BOF, talk to us early. And then June 12th is to let the chairs know you've got something coming in that helps us get a little bit more organized. And then the proposal should be in on June 18th. And then we will announce the topics roughly around June 25th. And then your draft deadline is July 3rd.
Those haven't been announced to the list yet. We will be posting them shortly. Just so you understand how we use the deadlines. If you make the deadlines and you're in line with what we need, you basically go to the front of the list for agenda time. If you miss them, you end up at the end in any other business if we can fit you in. And please start your drafts when you submit them if they're for consideration at this working group with a draft. This is slightly wrong. It should be draft, your last name, dispatch, and then the rest of it. And material that's for general area discussion, not specific to this working group or that will be processed through this working group, should go on the general art list. And anything that is for us should go on the dispatch list. That's how we're hoping to use these two lists separately. Sometimes there's been some confusion about whether apps discussed became which one and so forth. So ADs, this is your floor time. Anything? I only see Ben and Alexi.
So we have a new area director.
Oh.
Who I don't see.
That's a great first
So
impression.
tell him he's expected to make a speech when he comes in.
We'll come back to this when we have more areas.
Right. Alex, right? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's good. We'll come back to area directors a little bit later. We got a few more area directors in the room. Never have enough area directors.
Yeah, I think very quick thing that Ben mentioned to me, I probably should mention. We just created Art Directorate, which has 3 ADs and no members. So we have all the documents in the world to review and nobody to review them. Oh, here he is. So I think the plan is initially for ADs to play with the interface and see how it works and try to request documents, and we can start talking to recruit people as well. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, I would like to see how much work this is actually to manage, and then I can more intelligently talk to a potential secretary once we recruit one about how much work it is. And
what's happening to Appster? Sorry, Barry.
Along that line, I'm curious, this is Barry, how many people in this room would be willing to do reviews of documents, say 1 document a month to help out the area directors?
write down the names quickly. Okay, I think we'll need to do a bit more recruiting, but that's somewhat promising. It was more than 0, so I'm impressed. Okay, thank you.
What's happening to Appster?
So I think we're going to close it, and Ben was separately talking about the RAI side directorate, which is not being used. So art is going to be the joint thing. But if you have opinions, email to art-ads@ietf.org. I don't think we have decided exactly how this is going to work, but I think a single directorate makes sense.
There are various nods around the room. Outstanding apps OG items. This is the former Applications Area General Working Group. All of its final documents have made it all the way to RFC status, so that Alexi, I believe, is planning to close that working group any moment now. Might as well just stay at the mic. I'm just going to keep calling you up.
Yeah, it's actually the last document got published on my birthday, so I should have closed it back then. So
there's nothing left there.
There is nothing left. So And we have a quite a impressive list of like, I think almost like 20 documents we published over years. So yeah, I'll just craft a, nice short email saying thank you everybody. And
So Ben, do you have any new people to introduce?
Oh, yes, our new area director actually deigned to show up finally. I understand he has some prepared remarks.
I am thoroughly unprepared for this. So, hi. Yes. Got nothing. I'm taking over the preponderance of Alyssa's group's name. Listen, noob, this is how we do things here. Adam Roach, impending art area director.
Thank you, Adam. Now, related to this, we had a few working groups that wanted to thank our outgoing area director. Just cringed. So, Alyssa, can you come join us? And maybe, Richard, would you like to?
In the pink box. As some of you might be aware, we have sort of a tradition here of thanking outgoing area directors in the RI area and now the art area, with sort of celebrating with gifts along a theme. And the theme we've arrived at this year is music. And so to kick that off, I have this classic Miles Davis album, Kind of Blue. And this is presented on behalf of the ICE working group, which is not meeting this week. They've delegated to me to present this. Now, they presented me with this, and I think John Peterson suggested we focus on vinyl as the medium here. But I wasn't sure exactly how to turn it into sound, since Apple decided to remove the physical media slots from their laptops a little while ago.
Just in time.
So I think that Colin and Tim have another theory here.
So on behalf of the dispatch group, Tim put this together. Tim, we'll have some slides up here for you. So start unpacking that. We need to plug that in.
Yeah, so over in the Codec working group, we really thought the idea of music was a great one, and vinyl was an excellent choice, but Richard rightly pointed out, Alyssa might need a record player to play her records, because she probably didn't already have one. And so we thought, we could give some recommendations of Reddit audiophile approved record players, but somehow that just didn't seem good enough. It didn't seem to really represent the true leveraging of the work we do here at ART. So we said, what if we made a record player that streams Opus over WebRTC? So, if they can get it unpacked.
This is the only reason we needed the 2.5-hour slot this morning.
We have
It's in last call.
mounted a Raspberry Pi inside this record player. It is feeding USB audio off of the record player's internal A to D, and then connects back out through Ethernet. It also supports Wi-Fi. So if we plug this thing in here,
It's completely safe.
so give it a moment to come up and get connected
Alyssa may
to
get added to the
IETF
terrorist watch
Wi-Fi.
list for transporting this.
Wait for your record player to boot.
Depends on where you fly.
That's my Olympic behavior.
Sorry.
The PowerPoint says certificates by Let's Encrypt.
Was totally rehearsed.
Always something in the demo.
Just because it won't play jazz. Oh, it's the wrong album.
Cisco must have a problem with blues. Okay, I'm not sure it's actually booted, so. Sorry, what? Anyway, we need like Tim to debug that. Here, you want cable? There you go. Okay. Switch to here's audio. Keep playing. Yep. So, we think that you should probably be able to get up slides 2, the following URLs, so I can get them back up. Oh, so I continually tell people about this WebRTC stuff. You know, the standards aren't done yet. Okay, let's go back to our previously scheduled show. We have another show. Blame the chairs. It's probably broken. Okay. So we're going to leave Tim to debug this for a minute, but we would like to tell Alyssa, thank you very much for dealing with our Okay, you want to? We're just going to move on while people debug this. You don't have to. You don't have. You want to say something? Go ahead. Please.
Wow. I honestly just don't even know what to say. This is awesome. Thank you. I was joking with a few people in the art area last year about, how we have this tradition, and there was, suggestion that I was going to get vegetables as a thank you, and I sort of redirected and said, well, there's some other things, and but never expected anything like this. So really, I'm very touched, and I will say that I have felt the whole time that I've been participating really in the IETF, almost 10 years, that the art area or the apps area, the RI area before, is the fun area. We definitely have the most fun and the best jokes. And I hope, and I am confident that that tradition will continue. But also that means I've had a ton of fun with all of you as art area director, and I expect that to continue. I'm not going anywhere really. Oh, the other thing I will say is that I think a lot of the sort of innovation around how we do things in the IETF and how we keep current and bring in new people. Magic, huh? Woo! Good stuff. That's awesome. I think a lot of the new ideas that have permeated throughout the entire IETF have started in our area. So I will still be looking back to all of you to keep coming up with those ideas and how we can make the IETF better. And you guys know where to find me if you want to help with that or complain about anything. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Adam's on the hook for fun now.
So we do have other working groups who aren't meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
So would any other working groups that aren't meeting this week like to say anything?
Or in our case, I know it's like we're meeting, but Alyssa's not coming to sit for. So we also have something to present to her. This is Joy Division's Level Terrace Apart. I wanted to find something with, a neat vinyl color, and this is actually clear. So this is from both chairs. This is me and Gene Mahoney.
Hi, John Peterson. I've been sent on behalf of the Modern Working Group to provide a contribution from Modern for a Change. So this is a record that's called, yes, those of you who know Modern know what I'm talking about. So this is a record by a band called Slint. Both Tom McGarry and I are big fans of kind of indie rock stuff, so this is some good indie rock for you.
On behalf of the JS on BIS working group, which we were hoping would close this week, but unfortunately some things came up. We have some Smashing Pumpkins.
And on behalf of the HTTP working group, we have a very not rare first Australian pressing of Talking Heads' Little Creatures, which contains parenting advice, stay up late, and a song that is not about the IETF, Road to Nowhere.
Thank you.
You can pick it all up later. All right.
Okay.
We'll go back one. Just mention that we have everything that was a dispatch working group item from last time has been punted entirely to SIP4. So we have nothing currently pending for dispatch. We hope that agrees with what your understanding is. So we're thin on BOFs this meeting compared to previous ones. There are only 4. I invited the chairs to those BOFs to come and give a brief comment on what you're doing and when you're doing it, if any of them are here. If not, that's the list. Anyway, 21, 2020. Or if you know what they are. Okay.
I know we have people in the room that can speak to each one of these briefly. Give us the one-line description of each one of these are. Mark. Woo. You can't hear us? Oh, can you give us the one-line description of, or Martin, can you tell us about GitHub? What you guys are doing this?
Yeah, apparently we use it in some working groups here, and we're having a discussion about formalizing that process and getting a better understanding of how we do it, and probably writing some things down about how we do it to help people out.
Alyssa or somebody else want to comment on this the IASA BOF 2.0? Oh, sure.
So IASA, for people who don't know, is the IETF administrative support activity. It's the word we use to describe how we administer the IETF. And the way we do it now was established about more than 10 years ago. So we've been starting a community discussion about changes we might want to make, challenges we're facing as an organization from an administrative and funding perspective. So we're having a discussion on Wednesday afternoon about some of those things. We have a problem. We have a workshop report that describes some of the problems. We're going to be discussing that and next steps in the community discussion. So if you care about how the IETF is administered or what its fundraising situation looks like, please come to IASA 2.0.
Anyone want to say anything about coordinated address spaces or KEEP? Okay, excellent then.
And 2 new working groups have formed since South Korea. JMAP, I think Alexi can certainly talk to JMAP briefly. Or somebody else.
Hi, Brun Gondwana.
You can turn the mic up.
Yeah, I'd like to that. Yeah, JMAP is mostly an attempt to create an email protocol that means that people don't spend the first 6 months of developing a new client trying to understand 30 different standards and discovering that there's random support for them and then give up. That's pretty much it.
When are you meeting
Thursday?
When are you meeting Thursday?
Thursday afternoon.
Okay. And CBOR?
Joe Hildebrand. So yeah, we're doing a CBOR working group that's doing 3 things. Number 1, moving the CBOR spec along towards proposed standard, fixing a couple of nits, that sort of thing. Number 2, talking about the possibility of standardizing some extra features, extra tags, that sort of thing. Number 3, and the part that may be more interesting to folks in this room, is looking at standardizing a definition language that you can use to specify either CBOR or JSON messages in protocols. And that's CDDL, or CUDL is the name of that protocol that we're using as a starting point for that discussion. So come Thursday afternoon at 1300 to have that discussion.
All right.
Thank you. I am Marc Petit-Huguenin, and I am presenting this. Can you hear me? Yes. Next slide, please. So, why this draft? So, as stated, RFC 2736 and RFC 3550 clearly state that we should not send packets that are bigger than the MTU because fragmentation is bad. If fragmentation is bad on the first link layer, it's probably bad elsewhere. So the idea of this draft is to reuse the protocol we just finished last call, working group last call in the TRAM working group, which is draft IETF TRAM-STUN PMTUD, which is itself an implementation of RFC 98-21, which is used to discover the path MTU for protocol who do not have a mechanism to discover path MTU. Next slide. So, what do we need? So, this is kind of a draft that impact probably a lot of people in art. So we need guidance to find what is the best way to collect identifiers for RTP, RTCP packet. We need an additional attribute in SDP to signal that a server is capable of handling PMTU discovery packet. And we probably need some guidance from the ICE expert, because this is a protocol which is running alongside all the ICE stuff, which is already a lot of stuff. So next slide. So the question is that, is there first any interest in this draft? Is there interest to progress this? And if yes, we would like to know where to go to make progress.
Jonathan Lennox. So my question is, if you're running this alongside ICE, why do you want to do it in RTP in the first place? Why not just do path MTU discovery in the ICE channel?
first, it's not only ice, right? We may want to use it for SIP, for example, in the case it's not using ice. So it's kind of a more generic protocol, but we still probably need to have some guidance when it's used with ice.
I mean, my suggestion is if ice, I mean, ice seems like a much more natural protocol for, sort of as an extra, since the purpose of the ice of the ice is to figure out transport characteristics, I would say if you're using ice, it's more natural. I mean, I could certainly see use cases for, when you're doing RTP without ice, but it seems less compelling. And at which point, if you're doing that, you might want to think about, which it gets a lot harder, of course, some of the multicast cases of RTP.
Yes, it's not with multicasting in mind, but yes, probably a good idea to prioritize this, yes.
So Martin Thompson, I'm kind of with Jonathan on the ICE suggestion. Frankly, I don't think that the multicast scenarios are going to be tractable in any particular way. If you want to go off and solve that problem, it's probably a number of research projects required before that happens. I see a lot of RTP usage now is tied to ICE, and fixing the problem there is both simpler and easier. So I would suggest just sticking to that.
Eric Priscola, plus one to that. Also, it's worth observing that in many cases, there are other protocols co-located with RTP over ICE, and those have their own PMTU discovery problem. DTLS and SCTP, and being able to simply inform them of the PMTU rather than having to do independent PMTU discovery would be attractive.
Well, I'm not sure, because SCTP has its own path discovery protocol, right? So you don't need to solve it for SCTP, it's already there.
Well, I'm saying that if you could simply tell it what its PMTU was, that would make life easier. I mean, PMT discovery kind of sucks. So the fewer times you have to do it, either you have to burn actual packets, which you want to send, or you have to burn bandwidth by sending bogus packets. So let's do that once rather than n times. And I'm also kind of curious how we're going to do it with how this is going to interact with bundle.
Well, yes, this is why we need advice from.
Right, but I guess my point. My point is that if you simply adopt Jonathan's suggestion and use ICE, all those problems go away.
Yes, so when we thought about this, about ICE, the thing is that we don't need it for DTLS, because DTLS is using, it's only for the exchange at the beginning, and that this is SRTP. So we don't have to do path discovery for the application data, because there is no application data. And then we don't need it for SCTP, because SCTP has its own path discovery mechanism. So why do it twice? So, but it could be a good point, doing it at a lower level and then pass the path MTU up later.
So Martin Thompson, Echo sort of reminded me of a reason why you absolutely probably don't want to do it in the RTP layer is if you are running over ICE, you lose visibility of what path you're operating over, whereas ICE actually understands the path. And if you're doing path MTU detection over ICE, and ICE does this ICE mobility thing, or it chooses, it nominates a different pair, then you're actually on a different path, and the information that you've learned on the first path is carried across onto the second path, and you don't want that to happen. Which is part of the reason why the higher layer protocols like SCTP actually implement the MTU discovery themselves, because they actually understand the existence of the paths they're operating over. In the case where you're running SRTP over ICE, ICE really needs to be the place where you're doing this.
Magnus Westlund, one additional things why SCTP is kind of hampered in the case of running over ICE DTLS layers, that yes, it's encrypted and it doesn't get the any possibilities to get the ICMP message up. So
all right. So it seems pretty strong advice here to go try and figure out how to do this at the ICE layer instead of the RTP layer. Is that a reasonable way for you moving forward? Do you see any?
Jonathan X. I mean, if there are compelling use cases for RTP without ICE, then we can look at this. But so far, I haven't really heard any. Like I said, I think most, in the modern world, I'd say most of the RTP without ICE is either VoIP, which isn't likely to implement something new like this at this point, especially because audio doesn't really have MTU issues, or else like IPTV, which gets you into multicast areas.
Right.
Gonzalo. For me, it was just to try and understand if there's work for us to actually do, meaning it's fine for us to redirect and work on it as an ICE problem. It's just, is there interest in actually solving the problem?
Okay, I think I would. No one spoke in favor really of solving this problem. So unless somebody wants to move this work forward versus solving the problem with ICE, I think we'll sort of consider this dispatch for a bit. Is that fair enough? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the sort of the conclusion should be, encourage people to proceed looking at how to deal with this at the ICE layer instead of the RTP layer for now. Got that one, Bert? Who do we have next? I think we are to web linking.
Mark.
Yeah. Yes.
Good morning. So a long time ago, in an IETF far, far away, we had a document, RFC 5988 I'm so used to saying this at the end now, about web linking. And next slide. And this is a specification that defines kind of the generic concept of what it means to link from one resource to another on the web using a URI, and especially using a typed relation. So link relation types, those things that you see in HTML and other places. And it defines this model in a somewhat rigorous fashion. And it also defines a way to serialize this model into HTTP headers. And that was the driving force for that specification, because it had been kind of half specified way back in the early days of the web, and then dropped to the floor, and we figured out that actually it was quite useful. And so we wanted a formal specification for it. Next slide. And so this has been picked up by a number of different communities. It's used in Core. It's used in HTML, sorry. Acme uses it, awesome, yay. It's in Atom. It was kind of derived from some of the work we did in Atom way back when. The JSON LD folks and the semantic web folks use it for stuff that they do. And that's the most politic way I could put it, yes. And it's used in lots of other places. It's kind of one of those foundational specs that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it helps build some structure into other stuff. And so when we did this spec, it was something that I did in my spare time, and it was AD sponsored, because way back when, that was kind of how things were done. Alexi, were you the AD that sponsored it? I really forget who it was. It's possible, yeah. But so it went out there and it got adopted by these communities, and it was good, and it sat there for a while. And in the meantime, once it became, sorry? It was Alexei. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Alexei. So that makes some more recent conversations a little more ironic then. Okay. It's been adopted, and we've found some issues in it, some of them small and some of them large. And I started a repo just to track that and to start working on a replacement document, again, on the back burner, kind of on my own time. And that got some attention from a lot of those communities, probably more than I intended, and we had a lot of long discussions in the issues list of that repo. So next slide. This is a short link to that issues list. If you want to go and have a look at the issues there, I'll summarize the high points in just a moment. But we had a long set of discussions about them and got to a place where everyone was pretty happy, or at least from what I could see. And so the document has settled down. There aren't any open issues on it currently, and we think it's pretty ready to go. I do have some discussions that I want to have with IANA about how the interaction with them works, but that's about all that's left. So next slide. There's a lot of little stuff, and as a BIS document, this is entirely, appropriate, I think. We did things like clarifying terminology, cutting down the introduction and make it more human readable, updating all the references, incorporating all the errata, most of those from Julian, I think. Hi, Julian. We removed the registration template since they've served their purpose and they took up a lot of space in the document. Updated the ABNF, thank you again, Julian. And we added a non-normative algorithm for parsing link headers in the style of the What Working Group, because that's what the cool kids do today. We define these concepts of an application of linking and a serialization of linking more carefully. These are kind of the ways that you might express a link in serializations, as well as things that use links, the applications, and what constraints or guidelines we give to those things. Next slide. A little bit bigger of an issue that actually, at one point I think was a bit controversial. Folks in the semantic web world wanted a lot more rigor around how to create a URI for a registered link relation. So we have a registry of link relations that's just a short token, for next or home or lots of these things that we use as a shorthand. But the actual extension syntax for link relations is a full URI, so it's grounded in a namespace. And so these folks wanted a way to express those short registered relations as URIs, which the spec didn't do terribly well. It kind of waved its hands about it. And so we had a long back and forth about how best to do that, and we think we've come up to a place where we have a reasonable approach to that makes everyone not unhappy. And so in the discussions that I had with Alexi in the background about doing this BIS document, this was one of the concerns, was that if that blows up, that might require a working group to sort it out. But it's not blowing up anymore. So next slide. The other big thing that's kind of happening in the background of this draft, which you don't really get a good sense of from reading it, is that I really personally want to try and experiment with how we run the registry, in that the registry right now is quite clunky in how it's run, and it's not very friendly to end users who aren't familiar with the IETF process. And this is a kind of a recurring theme in what we do here. We have certain numbers of registries whose audience is not just protocol folks at the IETF, it's a much, much wider audience of developers, and they need to interact with these registries in a more friendly fashion. And so there's been some thinking put into how can we do that, and how can we establish those procedures. I think the insight that I'm currently operating under, which may or may not be disabused, is that we don't need to document all of those procedures in the RFC. What's important is we document the relationship between the registry and the experts in IANA to make sure that they can evolve a structure that works. But that's one of the discussions that I think still needs to happen a little bit more publicly, at least in this community. Is there a next slide? I'm not sure there's a next slide.
No.
Okay, thanks. So that's where we're at. Like I said, there aren't any open technical issues. It's just kind of an issue of an open discussion with IANA to happen. The big question I have is, where should this go? I don't think I can productively do anything with this document on my own anymore, so it needs to either be AD sponsored or it needs to go into a working group. And if so, what working group is appropriate for that? One possible future would be to create a new working group for it, a hopefully very, very short-lived working group, which we've done before with the lovely work on Just Font. Although that wasn't as short-lived as we thought it would be, was it now? They never are, yes. If only they grew up as fast as your children did. Oh, you're very kind. So that's my question, I guess, is what do people feel that we need a working group for this, or could this happen in Dispatch or AD sponsored? Or what?
Okay, so I mean, I don't think it quite happens in Dispatch. It could be discussed on that list or whatever, but it seems that you have two very different levels of things here that maybe you should tease apart a little bit more and talk about more, because one of them is a fairly straightforward update BIS to a draft. Another way is finding a way that is a problem that lots of people have had to have a better registry system.
Yes.
And you all clearly have some ideas for that, which are not in this draft.
Yes.
I think that that sounds like a very interesting and meaty topic that needs more ability to have a community input on than we would normally run on a dispatch list.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have
And that may
tried
be
to,
completely, it may have nothing to do with that draft, right? Maybe a
Right.
separate thing.
I've tried to have that discussion for at least 5 years. And it's always been kind of sidetracked into other discussions. We had the Happy IANA work. We've had other discussions on the side. It's something I'm very interested in. I'm happy to talk about with folks, but I need a venue where it's going to be able to be focused upon and we come to a conclusion. And I haven't seen that venue yet.
I propose one.
I propose such a venue.
Excellent. Okay.
This is Barry. I propose that would be a BOF. It goes beyond the art area.
Right. And what I really want to do is give the experts of the registry, and full disclosure, I am one of the experts of that registry, the ability to experiment with how they allow registrations to happen, because I think trying to write it down in an RFC and then execute that is a recipe for disaster.
Right.
I think we need to figure out what we need to do first.
To be clear, I wasn't suggesting anything related to this document
Right.
there. But so first of all, I think this document should be AD sponsored. I don't think we need a working group for it. And if we want to pursue generalizing some changes to registry stuff, I think we need to have a BOF for that, and maybe after some experience with this, we can do that.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that I want to do is not really something that, it's something that can happen within the current scope of work of the experts, depending on how you look at it.
Yes, the reason I was suggesting a BOF is that if this is a good idea, we wouldn't want to keep it to ourselves, and we'd want to discuss
Right.
it with the community.
I just don't know if it's a good idea.
And let's be
I'm
really
gonna
clear,
try it
you have
first.
not presented what this idea is. We're certainly not approving it in this working group right now, right?
Right.
I didn't think you were, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, for this document, I suggest just having Alexei sponsor it.
Sure. I just don't, so have you read the IANA consideration section of this document? Okay. I mean, if we can come to a place where we can get this document out and it has enough flexibility in it where we can at least do some of this experimentation and not have to rewrite it in 6 months or a year, I think that would be good.
Hi, Wendy Seltzer, W3C, and I've brought this to the attention of W3C community, and I think, personally, I think lightweight registries sound useful.
I can talk about what I'm thinking of, but yeah, Roy.
I'm Roy Fielding, Adobe. First, we use links heavily in our upcoming APIs, so that's good, public APIs. So I certainly hope that it moves towards more standardization. The other thing I wanted to note is that I'm starting work on a specification of hypertext references, which has a lot of overlap.
Let's talk.
As an update to 3986.
Okay, we should talk. I can do a seamless transition into the BOF this afternoon, because one of the things I want to do with the registry is manage it on GitHub. So, sorry. I want to, oh, how interesting. I want to manage the registry on GitHub, but not form a dependency on GitHub, which is the fun part. I just made Alexei go,
My guess, it's just my sort of intuitive sense of this is that you'd have widespread interest in that at IETF, but a proposal to do that should be brought forward and BOFed.
I don't want to do it for the whole IETF yet. That puts way too much pressure on getting it right the first time.
Okay, returning specifically to this document. Well, I will blame Mark no matter what. So if I'm doing AG sponsored, I will need a document shepherd. Okay, Barry wants to share the blame. That's good. Other related question: is it okay if we use dispatch for soliciting comments on this document?
Of course.
Or-
Yeah,
or
yeah.
art. Well, yeah, okay, fine. If, right, okay. It is, yeah. I don't want to be creating new mailing list if we're not going to do working group. I mean, we could, but it's just, if it's okay, I'll just use dispatch or art. Okay. Well, I'll have to read it next, and then I'll let you know how much beer you're buying me.
So, Alexei, would you like further discussion of this draft on art or on dispatches? I mean,
Well,
either
for
way.
art, I don't need to ask your permission. For
No, you don't
dispatch,
need
I
it for
do.
either,
So
really. I mean, it's like let's just. What I hate is when it's unclear. Let's make it really clear to people where to take the dispatch.
let's do it on dispatch because we brought this to dispatch. You know, just. Yeah. I think I can always forward to art, so
Right.
that's
If
fine.
you choose to sponsor it, we can say we are now switching this discussion to art.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. No, the proposal is for Alexei to AD sponsor it, and he may or may not. That's his call. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Roland Jeske from Deutsche Telekom, and I propose an addition to the reason header. And first, I would like to say that the term location used here within this draft has nothing to do with the location used for emergency calling. That I get a couple of comments back from people to point that out. We will see it later on a slide. So we have the RFC 3226 where we have defined a reason header itself, and it allows also to carry Q850 courses, which are the courses, release courses generated within the ISAP network. And we have also allowed to transport these courses within the reason header, within responses. That's another RFC, which we did. But what at least the draft is lacking is that we have a location within the ISAP network where this call was released. And this is the aim of the draft to add this location. If you go to the next slide, it shows at least the nice telephony network, the old ones, which we have. It's not like the SIP approach end-to-end. We have some private networks, local networks, transit networks, international networks. And this ITT recommendation have a specific course value, which is called location. And this location says, for example, where this call was released. For example, we have different kinds of user busy, where the user itself says, I'm busy, and the user agent, or at least a telephone, reject the call and says user busy. Or we have it also within the network itself, so that the network says, okay, I have no lines to the users, so the user is busy. And that is where we send the location with the user busy ISAP course. So again, go to the next slide. So why we do use, or why we do need it? We have, yes, mobile networks providing IMS, which is based on SIP. And we have still GSM networks, PSN networks that are using the ISAP coding. And with regard to that, we need a seamless interoperability between networks. And we have seen that we have problems providing services where we have to react on a user busy, for example. There are a couple of scenarios, and which is important to map a location. And that cannot be done with existing SIP values, SIP responses, which we try to do. We have already examples where we did it with other ISAP courses, but the busy keeps us busy at least. we have only two codings, so we have the BC Anywhere and the normal BC within zip, and that's why we would like to introduce addition to the coding. So it's a small add-on within the reason header. So, and that is the proposal. Thank you.
Who's read this draft? Okay. Anybody want to provide any comments on what we should do with it? Suggestions? Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Somebody hit the...
Hi. Do I have the mic?
We hear you.
If I have the mic, I guess, one, do you want comments on the draft or just on how to dispatch it?
I want to know how to dispatch it. So I've got a couple of comments on the dispatch list already, so I will incorporate them. At least mainly it was the use of the wording location, so I will change this to something like ISOP location or something like that. So the question is if this either could be anywhere dispatched or if this can be, for example, a AD-sponsored activity.
Okay, I guess I don't really have any comments on where to dispatch it.
Okay, John Peterson. Sorry, my voice is really going out today. Yeah, so there seem to occasionally come up more reason code-ish kinds of things that people want to do. So it's not that I can't imagine there being a bucket of like reason, cause code. Because I've heard some of this from Stir. I know there's some work that people are doing in Addis. Mary, maybe you know more about this, right? Around some of the reason codes people want to use there. So I mean, you know, I think we could probably scope an effort that would be around that, but I suspect that would be and this could certainly fit into that bucket.
Process perspective, and I'm speaking as the SIP core chair for the next 40 some odd hours. This seems to fit in SIP core's new charter just fine. So I think that it would be a reasonable sort of thing to take on there. I haven't looked through the technical contents of the document. I know Pete has some thoughts there he's going to share in a moment, but I think it's a perfectly good venue.
This is Pete Resnick. So not being a SIP person, I just got whacked on the nose rather appropriately on the IETF list during the last call for the 666 document, and told that headers don't go back through proxies in error codes. Don't necessarily go back through, and that's why you had to use 666 and you couldn't put the "this is spam" in a header because it wasn't going to make it back to where you wanted to get it. Isn't this the same thing? Isn't this the same problem? You're sticking a header into a failed response code, and it won't necessarily get back through proxies.
Let's say it's not a new header, it's an extension to a header. So we have the Q850 course, we have the text, and then there's some addition saying the location, the ISOP location.
So existing headers do always make it back through proxies, new ones might not? Is that the issue?
Christer Holmer, basically what you say is correct, but at least from my implementation and product experience, the reason header do go back. In general, what the comment that was made that headers don't go back, I totally agree with that. But I would almost say that de facto standard, even though it's not really specified in anywhere, is that the reason header do tend to go back. But that, I mean, if others have other, experience, but that's at least, my experience. So
this seems, I mean, it seems somewhat within the scope of SIPCore. If we decide that we're getting enough of this work in SIPCore that it makes sense to split off something to deal with that type of stuff, I'm sure that that could be addressed at that point in time. Does anyone want to speak about this, doing something that's other than sending it to SIPCore, I guess is the question. Okay. I get, you know, who's going to work on this if we send it to SIPCore, just out of curiosity? Okay, got one hand. That's better than zero. No, clearly we got some at the front of the room. We got a couple. So I mean, we're going to send this to SIPCore. Obviously, SIPCore will have to decide whether they want to proceed with it or not. Does that work for people? Okay. Dispatched. Okay. Yep.
John Levy. I liked him looming there.
I'm talking very briefly about what I think is a tiny change to DKIM. How many people here know how DKIM works? Most of you? Okay, good. So I have, for the rest of you, I have the next slide, please. Next slide. Here we go. Here's what DKIM does. It takes a mail message, it hashes it all up, it signs the hashes with a private key. It then adds a header to the message with the sign, with the signature. Then when a recipient gets the message, they can look up the corresponding public key in the DNS, verify the signature, and if the signature is good, then you can make various assertions about and assumptions about the message. Next, please. DKIM is defined with, it currently is a very small registry of hash algorithms and signature algorithms. Hash algorithms are SHA-1, which is deprecated and nobody uses it anymore, and SHA-256, which we all use. The only signature algorithm currently is RSA, and it's plain, ordinary RSA. And in the signature itself, there is a tag that says what hash algorithm and what signing algorithm you used. So it's like A equals, I think SHA-256-RSA. And then in the key does not identify, the key says what signing algorithm is used and a little used optional field about what hashes you're allowed to use. So both the signature and the key allow you to, are designed to allow new algorithms to be added. Next, please. So here's the problem. The spec currently says, the spec is really old. The spec says you're supposed to be able to use 512-bit RSA keys, but nobody does that anymore, I hope. The signers must use at least 1K keys, and we are thinking that 1K keys are okay now, but they're getting a little long in the tooth. So we want to expand to 2K keys. Well, that's fine. You could just, normally you would say, I'll just make the key longer, and I'll put the signing key in the DNS, and everything will be cool. However, it turns out that doesn't work because a 1K key is almost 256 bytes. We store them in text records. Text records are stored in chunks with a 1 byte length, so that each chunk is limited to 256 bytes. And although text records have always, since the dawn of history, been defined as including more than one string, the crudware with which people provision their DNS only handles a single string. And a guy, I don't think he's here, but somebody at Google actually went through and tested a bunch of these things, and there's way too much DNS provisioning software that only handles a single DNS string, so that in reality, the limit of the text record is limited to 256 bytes. And I say, this is a stupid problem. We should not have this problem. Only a moron would write software that had this problem, but the world is full of people who write software like that, and it ain't going to change. So, I have two proposed solutions. First is new improved signing algorithm. Elliptic curve, keys are tiny, code is well debugged, blah, blah, blah. So for that, all we do is we would update the DKIM spec to say, okay, now in addition to RSA signatures, you can do EDDSA signatures. An alternative proposal, which Eric suggested, is do what we do in other contexts and actually put the signing key into the signature. So put the verification key into the signature. Just put a fixed size hash of the of the verification key into the DNS. The hash is of a limited size, so so we could do that. Okay, and this would then get rid of the practical limit on the key size. Well, at the cost of adding a new header field, but at the cost of adding a new tag to the DKIM signature, which is already defined to allow more tags to be added. We could do either or both. I think I have one more slide. Yeah. So for transition issues, we need to figure out how to do old and new signatures. The current spec says you can only have a single key record for each selector, which is and we could relax that to say we could have 2 key records, one for the old key and one for the old signing algorithm, one for the new signing algorithm. During the transition, verifiers are supposed to ignore signatures they don't understand. I hope that works. That is a code path that has not been well tested, so we need to go back and test it and see how much this is going to break. And the reason this is slightly urgent is there's this thing called ARC, which is a mutant version of DKIM that is being invented to help deal with the DMARC mailing list issues that I'm not even going to go into here. But ARC is the magic bullet. ARC is based on DKIM. To the extent that we could get DKIM updated now, we could get ARC updated now, so that ARC doesn't have to go through the same transition. And I believe that's my last slide. Is there another one? Okay, all right. There seem to be a few questions.
Let her rip.
If you could back up one slide, please. I think
Russ, who are you?
I'm sorry, Russ Housley. I think that supporting things like ED25519 is a good plan. However, it does not have the same API as any other signature algorithm. It does not, for example, have a hash algorithm. It is implied by using ED25519 how the hash will be constructed. I know this having just worked through how to use this with CMS.
Ew.
So your API is not as plug and play as this presentation implies.
Philhan Baker, Komodo. I think actually you probably want to do both. The reason for that is, yes, going to ed 25519 is a good idea right now, but we should try and get ourselves in a position where we can move on further. You might want to do ed 448 at one point. You might want to do something that's quantum resistant at some point. Publishing the key hashes actually, because you can always send as much data as you like in the mail stream,
right?
As long as you don't irritate the receiver. Putting the key hash is the most flexible thing. Doing both then means that you can add policy type stuff into what you send, and that can be very useful for if you want to go to anonymous DKIM or some of the other games that I've been playing with.
I mean, it is a highly open question about how painful the transition will be and whether we will end up with something like people can just barely do the transition and we'll never do it again, or else like now we've debugged this and we can add new algorithms. And it could go either way. I don't know.
Well, the other thing that you might want to think about is maybe if you went the key hashes route, then you could squeeze those in with the 1024-bit RSAs and have a different transition time.
Yeah.
Dave Crocker. So we have a tendency in the IETF to think of doing transitions as an integrated step. And we end up building cruft into the transition process to do that. From this, the view that I've developed is the way to do a transition is first specify where you want to be and make it be as clean as possible and have it be completely separate from any of the transition steps. And so what got me to get up here was your statement about doing things two ways in the message and having two different records to support what I assume was a single selector that gives you different keys depending on the type, ...
It would be easy to persuade me to persuade me that we do it with different selectors.
And that's where I landed on is
Yeah.
we have a construct for giving multiple signatures in a message, do multiple signatures. It's already there.
Yeah.
The fact that one of them is in the new style and one of them is in the old style is completely transparent to the meta structure, and it's much simpler.
Okay.
And therefore your transition isn't a transition in the technology, it's a transition in some operational practice, which looks a whole lot like some other transitions we already support.
Yeah, I mean, give or take the issue that we hope that the existing code will ignore the signatures it doesn't understand.
Well, but if it doesn't do that, we have bigger problems with that implementation anyhow, because we already have transitions that it has to support. This is just, in the macro, this is the same as all of those. The other thing that Russ's comment triggered in my thinking is it sure would be nice to move this stuff into a registry so we don't have to go around changing specs. We just change registry entries. And that requires that there be some regularization to how the registry entry is, and I'm not sure how to do that, but it's worth thinking about.
I thought we had registries for that. Yeah.
Well, but then we have a whole LAMPS is a whole working group that seems to be sort of kind of doing that, but not really, except it is.
Hi, I'm Jim Fenton. Let me give you a little bit of history, but I'll keep it really short. DKIM is actually a merger of two different specifications, one of which stored the public key in DNS and the other of which stored a hash of the public key in DNS. And we made a decision when we merged them to put the public key in DNS in order to cut down on the message header size, because some large email provider noted that it would take some non-trivial number of additional disk drives in order to store all of those public keys that were redundantly in all of those messages. So that's how we got here. So, I mean, that's sort of an interesting thing about design decisions, and I wish we'd gone the other way for that reason.
How many years ago was that?
I don't remember. It was probably 12 or so.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Right. But that was when the decision was made. In any case, I will note that publishing the hash of the public key in DNS in this particular application, I believe, has some IPR associated with it. And so that might be something also that you might want to consider.
Okay, thanks.
Eric Criscorla, basically plus one of what PHP said. I think that it's most flexible. It's most flexible to have the hash in the DNS, but it's we should be doing some modern algorithm as well. It seems like we've now converged an ED something or other, so I'm fine with that. Or I'd also be fine with P256 CCDSA. The point Russ made earlier is of course right about the hashes. My sense is the community is actually rapidly converging towards the notion that every curve should be used exactly with one and only one hash. So I think if we decide to do something other than ED2509, it should be like P256, we're P256, not like mix and match like we're doing now. It's an RSA thing, not really an EC thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way DKIM is specified, it's easy enough to say you have to use this hash with this algorithm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Barnes, plus one to what Ecker and PHP said. What you might consider, as much as I love being futuristic and using the latest cool stuff, you might consider, some support for whether it makes sense to support some of the NIST curves in this, like using P256 or SHA-256, only because there are a lot of signers out there right now, and you can't buy a signer right now that does ED25519, as far as I know. People will probably correct me on that, but the market, the support for that in the market right now is not great. So if you want to promote deployment, you might consider having some support for existing curves in there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm under the impression that this is supposed to go into OpenSSL real soon now, but I'm certainly open to. I mean, I'm a lazy programmer. I would rather use code that exists.
Sure, yeah, and I'm thinking more about, so OpenSSL and software libraries are an issue, but I'm thinking also of HSMs, which to the degree those are used in the DKIM ecosystem, I'm not sure. Those will have a longer transition timeline.
Okay.
This is Barry Leva. I thought this at the beginning of the queue, but now after hearing the queue, I'm quite certain. We seem to want to do this, and it seems like a new working group is the right answer.
What you're saying is no good deed goes unpunished. Okay.
I will remind people that we have experience out of here of spinning up working groups fast and quickly and trying to minimize the amount and pain and suffering that causes the people trying to do good deeds.
So, Martin Thompson, the only reason I got up was that there is a working group that is doing precisely this work. And they're over in the SEC area. They have all of the people who understand all of the issues that Russ and Eka and Richard have talked about. The actual interface to DKIM is kind of trivial. Oh, sorry, I was about to say, Curdle. I was going to say the interface to DKIM is actually pretty trivial because the design correctly anticipated the need to change these things. They don't require a huge level of knowledge about how DKIM works in order to define new signature algorithms. If you're willing to go over and participate on that mailing list, which might be for the time that it takes to write the draft, have a couple of rounds of discussion and get it through publication, which is what's happened with their current set of drafts, that might even be an even more lightweight way to solve the problem.
+1 to dispatching outside the area.
Phil Hambeck again. I recently implemented ED 25519. It took me basically 2 days, of which half of which was doing proxy re-encryption, which is way above that level. So it's not that difficult to implement, even if you have to do it cold.
Well, and I know Dan Bernstein has a reference implementation that you can start with.
Dan does, but I don't. No, I don't recommend you go there. No. Dan has it for the Montgomery stuff.
Okay.
This is Edwards, and it makes a difference. The thing about Curdle is it's very narrowly chartered, and deciding to go into Curdle might you need to understand whether you're going to be allowed to do published key hashes as a way around, or whether that's going to commit you to do nothing more than just add the algorithm.
Well, I suppose we can ask.
Yeah.
So I mean, this seems. I had looked at that charter ahead of time. It seemed to me there's two different issues here. There's one about how to select curves and how to do the crypto, and there's another thing that's really about the whole DKIM architecture, which you're talking about an architectural change that has nothing to do with crypto. Right? It has about where you store these things and the pointers to them. Do you want to separate those at all, or?
They are separate topics, but I would really rather do one update than two.
Hi, Stephen Farrell. So outgoing AD, there's one behind will probably disagree with me, but so I think the crypto bit of this, yeah, sure, would fit Curdle very well. I think the changes to the DKIM signature message header fields, if you wanted to recharter Curdle, which you might have to do to include that, then that would be okay as long as there's enough mail people actually pay some attention. But you would need mail people paying attention.
In fact, that's actually sort of an argument against going into Curdle, since
Correct.
mail people tend not to pay much attention in detailed crypto arguments.
Yeah. Now, all that said, this is like not that hard. So
yeah,
anything we choose should work.
Eric Pasqualius, I rise to support my former colleague. I was originally thinking that this was a Curdle thing based on Martin's comments, but I think based on the point Cullen just made, I think probably better to have a small focused working group than to do than to punt it to Curdle. I mean, I don't oppose taking it to Curdle if people want to do that, but I think that if I were voting as opposed to judging consensus, I would vote the other way.
So Martin Thompson, may I suggest that the area directors for the two affected areas have that discussion about who wants to adopt it? Because I'm not sure that this is actually necessarily an art working group, given the propensity of the security aspects, but yeah.
Okay, this ArtAD doesn't object to this being a new working group, so if interested people can write a charter this week, then we can sort it out, and we'll discuss with Eric about which area it lands on.
Wow. We'll see what we can do for some version of we.
Yes, and
Yeah.
So write us something really short and simple. Doesn't need to be more than a couple paragraphs. Put it on the dispatch list this week.
yes,
And
please, yeah.
We'll get our area directors to decide what to do with it next. There's, if there's consensus on the list, it'll be done.
Yeah, and also please come talk to me about possible, if you're interested to be chair. I assume it's not going to be you, so you're the document editor. So.
Okay, don't dare me to. For the minutes, I guess the proposal here is to move forward with this as a proposed mini working group with a quick charter, and we'll see if we can get the consensus on the charter. But everyone's good with that as a conclusion? Okay. That's it. Yeah. Yes, I didn't say that very clearly, and I apologize. So, dispatch has not fully dispatched this yet, but our proposal is that the direction we're going on dispatching it is with a mini working group. Write a charter for the mini working group. If we can get consensus on that mini working group, along with the area directors, obviously, then it will be dispatched into that. And it seems highly likely that could happen quickly. Thanks. This is the end of our stuff. So unless we're going to go back to streaming blues on the internet.
A robot arm. There isn't any other business slot. Is there any other business people want to bring to the area while we're all together? If not, we can adjourn quite early.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Blue sheets, please, up front. I have a blue sheet. If you have not signed a blue sheet, please come sign a blue sheet. If you have the other one, please bring it up to us. That's right. No, it gets stainless steel. Stainless steel.
I realize.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess I walked into later. I just looked up and and then I was about to sit down for breakfast and sat.